Yes, I do need a haircut. Hey everyone, Darren from hostelmanagement.com. Today I want to share with you the first of what I hope is many webinars from the North American Hostel Association, which is a newly formed trade association that we mentioned a couple of videos back. So if you're a North American hostel, that is a hostel in Canada, Mexico, or the United States, be sure to get in touch with either Sydney from the 11th Avenue Hostel in Denver, Frankie from the Bunk and Brew Hostel in Bend, Oregon, or Jim Kennett at the Northwest Portland Hostel in Portland, Oregon. Those are the key people that I know of that are forming this trade association to help hostels in North America. And among some of the things that have been talked about is advertising campaigns to start reaching more domestic travelers, because in COVID-19, it may be a while before international travelers are able to come back to our region. So this is their webinar that they produced. They gave me permission to put it on hostelmanagement.com. They don't have a website yet, so you have to get in touch with those people at their respective hostels in order to get more information about the North American Hostel Association. If you have a video of your hostel or your hostel association in your country and you want to share it with the world, our mailing list is about 20,000 people. Just send it over our way. We're always looking to find out what's going on with hostels all over the world. If you're doing something special at your individual hostel or you're part of an association that's doing special things in your neck of the woods, send it over our way. Contact us by email, darren@hostelmanagement.com. We'd love to get it online. We're starting to get a lot more video content because that's what everyone wants to watch. All right, let's get to the video.
All right. Well, hello. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for this virtual call about life during and after COVID-19, presented by the North American Hostel Association, specifically myself and Frankie Maduzia. So we'll introduce ourselves here real quick. If I could figure out how to go, there we go. I'm Sydney. I am the marketing director for 11th Avenue Hostel here in Denver, Colorado. We have a 122 bed hostel with 60% private inventory and 40% shared. I'm definitely a marketing and visuals person. I am not a data numbers kind of gal. So that's why Frankie is here, because he has strengths where I have none. And I'm also one of the board members of the newly developed North American Hostel Association. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this in coming months as COVID, continues to develop and we continue to figure out how to gracefully make an entrance into the world, if you will. And then Frankie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm here in Bend, Oregon, Frankie Maduzia with Bunk and Brew. I'm a co-owner. I believe Jay's virtual right now, probably on the call, hopefully. But we have about 45 beds. We have an outdoor beer garden space, so 2 food trucks, a beer tap truck. We have our liquor license on premise, so it's kind of interesting to have our transition here with the long-term, short-term, and the public all kind of meshing together. But yeah, that's what I got going on here in Bend.
Yes, and then quick run over of our agenda. So we're gonna just really quickly run through what we have already done between our 2 properties to cut costs. Obviously, our properties are very different in size, scope, location, all of that. So we figured it'd be helpful to have a variety of suggestions from different properties. And then kind of talk about long-term stays, do you, don't you, best practices, pricing strategies then for the interim, and then marketing strategies for the interim. And of course, we're going to follow up with questions at the very end. We do ask you, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So if something pops into your head and you want to ask it right then, just feel free to send it in the chat and we will get to it. And then if you can refrain from having side conversations in the chat, that would be really helpful, just so we can stay focused on what the bigger questions are and not have them get lost in conversation. If you do want to have a one-on-one conversation, there is a chat function where you can direct your question to a specific attendee. So please make sure you click that instead of sending your message to everyone. And like I said, we're recording this and we'll send it out so you can refer to and share the link as needed. Yeah, so let's do this. Let's get started. All right, so first and foremost, what our businesses, and when I say our, I mean 11th Avenue Hostel and Bunk and Brew, have done thus far. So right from the get-go, both of our properties switched to hosting weekly stays and offered a slight discount for those longer stays with stricter rules than normal to ensure everybody was safe and that rules were followed. And then we switched a lot of our inventory to private when able. Like I mentioned earlier, 11th Avenue is considerably larger than Bunk and Brew, so we had more leeway to do something like that, but I know that Bunk and Brew also limited their dorm capacity as well to help kind of make rooms feel a little bit more private and less crowded. We also immediately jumped. Oh yeah, thank you. Great. We also immediately jumped into local marketing opportunities because it was very apparent very quickly that national and international travel was almost pulled to a halt, but regional travel was still a possibility. So using Craigslist and Facebook and some of those almost old school marketing techniques to appeal to people in the local area to stay during a super unique time was important and something we immediately jumped on and continue to build up. We also, which I'm sure we're not the only ones, have resorted to very clever cost cutting at both of our properties. Everything from reducing trash pickup regularity to unplugging every single appliance that doesn't need to be running, to renegotiating insurance policies and various contracts as we were able to do so. And then also reducing staff to 4 days instead of 5 per week was something that we've done at 11th Avenue that has helped us save money. I know a lot of properties have not even had that option. They have either closed or had to lay off staff. We were able to keep our staff on, but in order to cut some of that payroll cost, we immediately reduced like work days. And then we also both really tried to find those community opportunities we could to work with those in our community and surrounding our community to make sure that we were engaged and not left out and not isolated, because most of the time that can happen in the midst of panic is to have a completely isolated or feel completely isolated as a business owner. So both our properties have joined the Adopt a Hostel campaign, which is an international campaign to support the hostel industry. Reached out to previous guests through email and social media, which we will talk more about some tactics to do that later. We both have been working with our local tourism bureau. Visit Bend is Frankie's tourism bureau and Visit Denver is mine, and actively reached out to them and let them know, hey, we're members and we need you right now to make sure that they are paying attention to hostels as much as they're paying attention to all of their other restaurant or other members. And then we've also worked with government agencies to see who we can house. Right now, the government has given out a lot of benefit programs and is supporting a lot of the community. So seeing how we could work with them to bring an additional business for the interim was something that was immediately done.
I want to jump in there real quick and just add the Chamber of Commerce. It just came to mind. We had some conversations with them. News reporters always reach out to your local bench or the local Chamber of Commerce. And then our rep was able to get them in contact with us. So it led to a really good lead in a press story. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting press is something obviously valuable at all times, but something that's almost a little bit easier in times of chaos when you can find a unique angle. So then the next question of long-term guests, do you, don't you? I don't think any of us got into this business to host people long-term. That's not what we're trying to advocate for. But we do want to chat a little bit about this because a lot of people have questions, concerns, and thoughts about it. So we'll definitely want to address that. So yes, Frankie and I would definitely suggest adopting some form of long-term stays temporarily. Like I said, no one in this chat probably started off thinking they wanted to be a landlord, but sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. So we would definitely suggest adopting some form of long-term stays to provide necessary cash flow, if you haven't already done this. Some tips and tricks to make this enjoyable and manageable for everyone is to set clear expectations and rules right away. If you don't have a housing agreement, now is a great time to create one. Use your existing rules that you would use for your short-term guests and kind of expand them for long-term stays. There's a lot of resources online you can look for. Frankie and I both have housing agreements that if you would like them, we can definitely share those with you and you can tweak as needed. We both require a small deposit. Here at 11th Avenue Hostel, we only require a $150 deposit. And we have found we do this because when there's a little bit more skin in the game, people seem to be more respectful of the facilities and the spaces, especially when they're there for an indefinite amount of time.
Yeah, we were taking initially first and last rent. We found that to be a little high and excessive. These are hard times on a lot of people, so we scaled that back down to basically half the rent. So one full payment up front and then half the rent. But it's absolutely critical that you take an authorization. Those fall off after 30 days with your POS system. And you need to just document that if they extend again another 30 days, you re-up that authorization. And or if they check out sooner, then you should void that authorization.
Another thing to do is interact with your guests as much as possible. I know a lot of people don't live on site, but if you can have some form of interaction with your guests regularly, whether it's a staff person visiting, a housekeeper, going into their rooms regularly, that's very important to make sure that all your rules are being followed and your space is still safe and cared for. Use your general screening tactics you would normally use for your short-term stays, for your long-term stays. A lot of times people that you don't want in your property are going to give themselves away pretty quickly. So ask them, hey, what are you going to do while you're in town? Like, how's life right now? What's going on? And people will usually give themselves away and share that information with you. And we also really encourage having a no public intoxication rule. Not only is it generally illegal everywhere, but this will save you a lot of headaches in the long term, just making sure that people are being wise and responsible. Here at 11th Avenue, we have gone as far as not allowing alcohol in public refrigerators, which is not normal for us, but we figured that during this time, it just would help discourage any sort of negative behavior around intoxication.
Yeah, it's tricky because as you get into long-term guests, they feel really comfortable and it's their home. So at the end of the day, you need to really drive home to these individuals. This is a business and it needs to be, stay professional.
Absolutely. And then adding on to that point that this is a business. So your long-term tenants don't run the place and you want to at all costs avoid residency. Now, of course, this depends on where you're located in the US. So definitely check with your local government agencies to make sure to understand what defines a long-term guest or a resident. So you understand those rules, but remember, you set the rules, so enforce them. It's a little bit painful, but it'll save you so much headache in the long run. So if somebody is being ridiculous, get them out of there. Depending on your local laws, move their room every 28 days. That's something we do here in Denver to make sure that nobody gets too comfortable. If you want to do this in a way that's non-confrontational, what we will generally do is we either will say there's a maintenance item we have to address, so like a plumbing issue or something like that, that requires them to relocate, or we can do something where we say, hey, every 28 days we do a deep clean of all rooms. This is for all guests just to make sure that everything stays clean and tidy. So that's a good, nice way to address it, and most guests seem to enjoy that, knowing that everything's going to be cleaned and cared for, which we do deep clean everything, so we're not lying to them. And then make sure if you have housekeeping that you're regularly in those guest rooms. Here we do every third day. At Bunk and Brew, they do once a week cleaning. But this just makes sure that you have eyes on what's going on inside the building, making sure there's nothing illegal or questionable happening, making sure there's no unwanted critters or friends in the building that you did not want or sign a lease with. So making sure you're regularly in those guest rooms is super important. And then once again, just having staff present in whatever way you can and knowing your guests by name, it goes a long way. People like hearing their name, and when they know you know who they are, they're less likely to do things that they wouldn't normally do out in public. And then, of course, just remind people that this housing is only temporary. There is going to be a day when COVID-19 ends. I know it feels like it's never going to come, but it will. So just make sure that you're reminding these people that at any time, this sort of housing could go away, that this is a hostel, this is a business, and long-term housing is not going to be available indefinitely, just so that when you are ready to start accepting more of those short-term travelers, it's a much easier switch to move over, but it doesn't mean you're tied to any sort of model extensively. And then Frankie's going to share some pricing strategies that he's come up with during this time to help create some cash flow and then create more value for guests as well.
Yeah. So these are strange times that we're all facing right now, and you got to protect your brand. So one is price gouging. Is there an echo? We have a couple mute
No, I think
mics
you're
on.
okay. I'll make sure. I'll go through and make sure everyone's muted.
Thanks. So we want to drive home that we want to not get into price gouging and with your competitors. I think that's really important. The market's going to be really variable right now, and so it's just it's super important that you utilize that. Right.
Especially since I will add, a lot of the OTAs right now are asking their properties to reduce their prices seriously. There comes a point of no return where if you are discounting and discounting, your product is not inherently gaining value to a consumer. So just be careful around price gouging.
Yes, you want to prioritize direct bookings. What we've seen is travelers have been a little bit more receptive to lowering rates, but this is not ideal from a yield management point of view because once you get into lowering your rates, it's difficult to maybe increase them again, right? So it's important to show transparency. That booking direct is your lowest rate with you. Yeah. Let's see. Comp sets. I love comp sets. It's a really powerful tool. If you're not utilizing Booking.com, even there's Expedia has it, and Pi has it with Cloudbeds. Google Review or Google Analytics has comp sets. We utilize most Booking.com and Pi because I found those two to be a little bit more user friendly than the others. So this is not understanding just comp sets in your city, but you should be looking at comp sets in your region, neighboring cities, and even other countries. For example, I'm in Bend, Oregon, Central Oregon. So we look at Vancouver, Canada, Seattle, Portland, and then down into California and LA. We find there's a circuit that the traveler travels on, and it's important to know what they're doing in your region. So it's really important that you just don't tunnel on your specific city. Dynamic pricing is really, really important. If you haven't been doing this, you should be doing it, mostly because the market has a history to bounce, right? So right now, everything's quite low. People are fearful, but I could use my own location as an example. I'm fully booked up yesterday, today, and tomorrow because of a holiday weekend. Now, right now, I do have a 75 long-term tenants to about 25% nightly rentals, short-term stays, but I'm easing that down and I'll be 50-50, and then I'll keep easing that number down. But by having dynamic pricing, this was able to catch my occupancy getting full, and then the markets around me demanding higher pricing. So it's really, really important to do. Some of my long-term tenants, they're paying about $15 to $20, depending if they do 1 week deal, 2 week deals. For bunk beds a night. And with dynamic pricing, short-term rentals came in, and then boom, $40 bunk beds, boom, $100 private rooms. And we haven't seen those numbers in a while. So, Sydney, do you have anything to add with dynamic pricing?
I think it's just a good reminder that this is a really good time to start practicing with these things. Dynamic pricing can be really intimidating, and here we did not do dynamic pricing until about 3 years ago, and it was very intimidating for us. But once we started doing it, it was amazing how much additional revenue we were able to bring in, and that additional revenue just means we were able to pay our staff more, we were able to increase services, clean more regularly inside of rooms, and just add more value to the consumer all around. So this is a good time to practice it when there's, low risk, you're not completely full, and you're not going to miss out on necessarily bookings that are going to go somewhere else. So I would definitely encourage you to just start playing around with it. And a good place to start is just to pick like a $10 range you're comfortable with and say, okay, this is my range. And then once you get comfortable with that, playing within that yard, expend it. Frankie increased his dorm beds by $20 basically overnight. I mean, and when you get more comfortable with it, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, it's important to ensure, despite lowering your rates, that you maintain a premium against your comp set. This protects your brand and your value as well. Jay and I adopted a strategy here where Bend's kind of shown historically it's a weekend town, that we're pretty reserved on the weekdays, but we go extremely aggressive in our pricing on weekends, and we capitalize on that. and it's worked. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Refund policies. So this has been interesting as we were going through COVID-19. I don't know how everybody's businesses, there's so many ways you could structure receiving payments from your customers. So we decided to have a 1-year rolling calendar, and with our availability, we also decided to take payment in full for the reservation upfront for direct bookings only. We noticed that with OTAs, they tend to be privileged and they love to cancel, modify, refund. They have all these requests. And so in the beginning, it was an absolute nightmare when we were taking payments for them. All we do is authorizations with OTAs. We don't take any of the money until they show up. But with club bids and taking money up front, it creates higher cash flow for us. We're getting reservations out in August, actually, just yesterday. A $700 reservation came in for the month of August. But where I'm going back with this refund policies, it's just an example of keeping that cash flow rolling. But with the refund policies, I had some European reservations call and say, hey, we can't come over and use our reservation anymore. They booked about 6 to 8 months in advance. It was pretty crazy. And I was like, oh, well, let me get you a refund. We take a small fee, the credit card transaction fee. So we're covered. Everything's pretty equal. It's 3%. It's an industry standard. I ran into an issue where I couldn't refund these guys. We used to have what's called enhanced credit capability with our merchant services. We use authorize.net in the back end, and we were able to refund them past 1 year. This all changed with COVID-19. They must have saw a lot of cash leaving their companies and refunds, and so they adopted new policies. And I found out about that. You never find out about these things unless it impacts you, and then you have a call. And so we now could only refund an individual up to 120 days is the max refund length now. And so we adapted our policies, changed it. But what we said, hey, let's still take reservations and payment a year out, but let's just, after 120 days, have in our terms and conditions, that converts to, instead of a refund, to a 1-year voucher. So it's kind of a compromise. So now we're not refunding them any money. We're keeping this voucher system in place. The vouchers are quite nice. Some of these Europeans, I said, hey, do you still come over in a year, maybe 2 years? And they're like, yeah, we still want to come over. So we gave them even up to 2-year vouchers. It's easy to keep track of. I was able to keep one specific reservation. There was a lot, so we were proactive with this, with the voucher system when all the cancellations came in. But one, we were able to keep $250, and I just, they negotiated instead of a 1-year voucher, a 2-year voucher. That was their counter negotiation. So think about that. Just leave notes in your reservation. It's really easy to do. And then mark the reservation as canceled so you don't pay taxes on it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. And then once you do all these fancy pricing things and start to practice that, what's next? So the big thing is practice marketing your hostel. A lot of hostels don't have the capital or the ability to continually market their hostel every single day. A lot of people do not have an in-house marketing person or a freelance marketing person, and that's totally understandable. But this is a good time to practice marketing your hostel and figure out what you're comfortable with, what works, what doesn't work, what your followers engage with, what they do not engage with. So practice marketing your hostel. Here's a couple very easy things to do. So first of all, communicate often and always. This is the way that marketing works. You have to talk to your consumers. So my first question would be, is your website up to date? If you do not have a COVID-19 page or pop-up or some sort of information on your website detailing your operations during COVID-19, whether you're open or closed, your safety practices, you need to get that up there. Find a way to get it up there, make it prominent on your website, because this is something that people are going to be looking for right now. And then also when they start traveling again, cleanliness and safety are going to be huge concerns for travelers. So making sure that's very visible on your site is super important. Yeah, and then I like to ask oh, sorry, go ahead, Frankie.
Yeah, this is, I wanted to quickly add to this is, don't have it super scary language, right? We were talking about this last night. And so on our website, we Jake kind of came up with the idea where he's like, hey, let's have it phase 1 is now open. People are kind of scared to travel right now, but they're still traveling and they're coming to you to relax or go out on a city adventure or to do something, right? So don't scare them. Just let them know what you're doing and let them know what phase you're in. And our language is kind of hey, Oregon's open for phase 1. Fantastic. Let's go, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely keeping it positive is super important, because you want people to have confidence in you when they're ready to travel. So a lot of people, like, you cannot convince people to travel or feel comfortable traveling, but when they are ready to travel, you want to make sure that the resources and the verbiage they're looking for, that sort of comfort, is there and ready for them. My other question too is, like, when is the last time you posted on your social media? You want to make sure that you're consistently posting on social media, making sure people know you're around, you're not going anywhere. It creates a lot of comfort and just assurance when people see their favorite brands posting regularly. So something that's really interesting is I was reading a study about how brand loyalty has changed, specifically within like grocery stores. You know, you might have gone to pick up your favorite brand of toilet paper, but it was sold out, so you switched to brands. And all of a sudden, like, you're no longer loyal to Charmin, let's say, and you're using Snuggles or whatever. So something similar is going to happen in the hospitality industry as well. People are going to try to be loyal to their brands that, you know, they see constantly, but if they feel like their brand is not available to them, they're going to switch brands. So being in front of your consumers as much as possible, especially your current followers, because those are generally your best advocates, is super important. And then make sure people know if you're open or closed. Just regular updates about that are super helpful for people. The 11th Avenue has been open the entire time during COVID-19, and we still get phone calls, or we have it on our website, we have it on Google, we have it literally everywhere that we're open, and we still get calls asking about it. So just make sure that's really relevant so that you're not fielding unnecessary questions and that people can find the information they need quickly. Now is the time to start emailing. I'm sure you've gotten hundreds of emails from brands you didn't even know you were subscribed to during this. But if you've never done it, start gathering your guest emails and use them. Previous guests, like I said, are going to be your best advocates and supporters. So go ahead and go through your system. There's some PMS systems that allow you to easily export emails. If you don't have that capability, get a work trade and get them to start copy and pasting emails into a spreadsheet, so that you have a good source for guest emails, so you can email them en masse, let them know what's going on, let them know what deals are happening, so they just can hear from you in a new way. MailChimp is a great free program to use if you don't have an email capability. So just now's the time. Get started on that. And also I encourage you to practice your photography and make sure your OTAs are completely filled out and looking good during this time. So if you're unwilling to pay for a photographer or rent a camera, or just use your phone camera. These phone cameras are getting very robust nowadays. So use your phone camera, run around your hostel, get some good lighting, practice your angles, just practice your photography and make your hostel look really good. And then make sure every single item on your OTAs is filled out and looking professional. I know there's always a lot of tension around OTAs, but rising tides float all ships, and the better they look in search, the better your property will look in search too. They all kind of work together, so you want to make sure they're all looking really good.
Yeah, and the hostels change, right? You know, we have a big beer garden, and it's been ever so evolving. And you know, all of our content of our backyard photos were like, you know, 6 months down the line, we're like, oh my god, nothing looks like this. They're out of date. So keep that content fresh.
Oh, absolutely. I'm amazed at, this is more a personal thing. I just love rearranging the furniture. And since I can only rearrange my house so much, I take it out on the hostel. So make sure that you're updating those photos and just sharing about that stuff. And then use Google My Business. If you're not connected, go ahead and connect to your Google My Business page. It's super easy. Just go to business.google.com and get started. It walks you through it. But if you are connected, update your photos. Make sure, like Frankie said, everything's relevant and current. Delete your old ones, delete your dark ones, and flag the bad ones. If somebody posted a photo that just really crappy, get rid of it. It doesn't need to be on your page. Respond to your reviews, take this time to kind of go through them, give yourself a little motivation boost, ignore all of the bad ones and only look at the good ones, you know, like we're all about good vibes here. Update your business info, make sure everything is filled out, make sure your special hours are open or are on Google. Here at 11th Avenue, we usually have 24/7 check-in, and we do not have that right now. We only allow check-in from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. So make sure people know that, and those hours are readily available. And then if you can, upload videos. Like I said, your phone is a big asset to you. So if you don't have any videos of rooms or anything, why not? Start trying. Darren mentioned earlier when we were before this call, it's like there's no harm in starting to be a videographer, and you can start and make bad videos and then get better and delete your bad videos when you get better. So I encourage you to try that. Everything you do now will ensure that your hostel shows up in search when the travelers are ready and looking for you. So you cannot force anyone to start booking. You can't force anyone to start looking at your pages. But when they are ready to travel and when they feel comfortable doing so, you want to make sure that everything they need is out there and ready for them. And then something that you can start doing too is just cleverly bundle rates. Skip your usual, bed and breakfast deal and package things that guests are thinking and maybe needing, like a mask or hand sanitizer, self-check-in. Those are things that you can upcharge for that are valuable to people right now. You can collaborate with local tour groups, and Frankie will share more about that here in a second. And then ask yourself, what would you want to see if you were traveling to another hostel right now? And what would you be willing to pay a little bit extra for? Just ask yourself that question and see how you could implement that at your hostel.
Yeah, what I like about Cloud Beds is you have all these add-on features and different rates that you could just create these really cool, unique packages. And so, right now, a lot of businesses are exploring different ways to make partnerships, and they're more open than ever. And so, Cindy and I were talking about this last night. It was kind of funny. There was a tour operator in town that in the winter were selling, discounted paddleboard and kayak rentals in bulk to us, so that we have to upfront that cost of $1,000, and that gets you 10 rentals, and then we pass that charge a premium on that, and then we're on the hook for selling these rentals to our guests. Well, obviously, thank God we didn't do it, because it was a high cash amount, and now look where we're at in these times. But I went back to them saying, hey, why don't we work on this commission-based structure? I pitched it to them once before. They didn't like it. Now they like it again, and it's in talk. And basically what that means is I bundle a kayak with a room, and if I facilitate that transaction, then I get a commission from that. And it's weird how these tour operators don't like it, but now they like it. So just keep re-engaging in those partnerships, keep getting creative. These self check-ins, charge a premium for that if somebody's maybe fearful and worrisome. You could have a rate, and you could really highlight all of that stuff on Cloudbeds, these different rates, and somebody could charge a little extra, and then you could send them their codes. You could maybe your room has external entrances. You can maybe charge a premium for a room like that instead of if they have to come into the house. So these are interesting times, and you need to look at other ways to I hate to say it, but upsell and charge and add add-ons. So, yeah.
Well, something too you have to remember, I know a lot of people feel like that would be taking advantage of an already difficult situation. But what we always tell our guests, especially since we have private rooms without bathrooms and private rooms with bathrooms, and whenever they say, why do you charge so much for a private bathroom? We tell them because it's valuable. Like, it has value to you.
Yeah.
You want a private bathroom, and so we have to charge more for it. It has value attached to it. So if someone's looking for some of that security, like a private entrance, it has additional value because there's less interaction there. And so you're doing more work maybe to maintain it if it's outside or something like that. So those things have value.
Yeah, I love it.
Most importantly, though, like I said, I know I sound like a broken record, but talk to your customers. Make sure they know you're here for them. Make sure you're around, and make sure that they are just aware that your business is here and it's not going anywhere. The biggest thing, though, is there are going to be stigmas around being open or closed during this time. There's no getting around it. You need to address them. So for us, our piece, we have stayed open during the entire COVID-19 epidemic. And this has been kind of contentious. We've gotten positive feedback for this. We've gotten negative feedback from our community for this. But something that was very important to us, we have unique circumstances. So our building's halfway under renovation right now. Closing would have decimated our budget for the renovation. And then secondly, we have a huge staff that we care about who's been with us for a really long time. And so it was really important for us to keep them employed and make sure that they weren't leaving. So we worked really hard to stay open and reach into our cash reserves to make sure those people were being cared for during a really scary time. For us, it was really important that our staff had somewhere to go and some sort of normalcy and consistency during this time. And that was a big motivator for staying open, even though it wasn't necessarily profitable at all, but it's something that was really important to us. But there's also stigmas around being closed. And so Frankie's going to address those real quick.
Yeah, exactly. So Typically a property closes because of its property specific problem, right? So this could be a physical damage to the property. It could be due to management, due to ownership issues, and so by staying closed too long, it doesn't show well for the community or location or just the business. I think it's when you're looking at reopening and establishing back in your existing market, there is a high risk there, but that's all why we chose to go into business, right? To be entrepreneurs and to own our own business. So just know right time to jump back in if you did have to close those doors. Let's see. So keep in mind though that COVID-19 is the reason why all of us closed, right? So it wasn't hopefully because of these other issues. So it was more due to an external, it was known as an external interruption. And so we hope that tourism starts picking back up. Be ready for that bounce in the markets. We've already seen the bounce here. So I think, that's the saving grace here, and our customers will be pretty understanding of it.
Yeah, and that just goes back to that communication piece. If you did close, let people know why. You wanted to make sure your family was safe. You were concerned. You were legally required to. Make sure people are just aware of that so that they're not thinking something horrible or sad.
Yeah, it's more of a suspended of operations. It's kind of more of an accurate term there versus closing. So just try to convey that. Keep re-engaging with your clients and your guests, and through your social feeds.
Absolutely. Don't worry, you can do this. I know a lot of this stuff seems overwhelming and intimidating, but now is the best time. And just remember, you don't have to do everything at once. So if you're going to start with one item that's really interests you and work your way through the list. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So just remember, you can do this. It may take a little bit of time, but you can do it. So we're going to take some questions now. That kind of wraps it up. Want to take some time for that. Again, please just feel free to put your questions in chat. And so let's see. So Frankie, this is a good question for you. So Carolyn said, how are you keeping track of voucher systems in cloud beds or separate spreadsheet?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, happy to answer that. We love the notes feature in cloud beds. So we type it in notes. A spreadsheet is, it could be a little overkill. It could be doubling down. Not a bad idea. But we track it all with the notes feature. It's pretty simple. Just you write a note. You just say you mark the reservation canceled. You say communicated with guests, XYZ, dates, times, where, what. Say they have a voucher good for 1 year. It's actually important with the voucher. Let them know that they could use it all at. They have to use it all at once. Like they might have a $250 voucher, and they may want to break that voucher up over time, right? And so it's really hard to track that. It's really annoying. You got to let them know. It's depending on availability. We do say there's no blackout dates, but it depends on availability, and there might be a pricing premium, right? If they all of a sudden want to book for 4th of July weekend, next year, well, they're probably actually going to have to pay $400 instead of $250, so they're going to have to pay more. So they know that, but notes feature in cloud beds.
Yeah, I think too, whenever we do vouchers, we include something in the notes, but in our bookkeeping side of things, we have everything attached to an ID. So we make that voucher have a name or a title or a number, and then that goes in the notes section so that when we're doing bookkeeping, let's say they stay literally a year later, then we can go into our actual accounting documents and say, okay, this is the amount of money, and it was just taken back in June of 2019 or whatever, and apply it. So we're aware of that. Let's see. So Darren is not seeing any demand for hostel beds or private dorms in hostels. And you think San Francisco is oversaturated with Airbnbs? So this is interesting, and something that we've experienced to a degree. So we also host Airbnb rooms in our hostel, and we've seen a huge uptick in those. And I think the expectation, especially with Airbnb, is that you're going to gouge your prices, which is something obviously, like I said, we're very opposed to.
Thank you. Cheers. Appreciate everything.
So again, don't price gouge with Airbnb. They are in a league of their own. But what I would recommend is encouraging those private-ish. Frankie, I'm going to mute you for a second. You're really loud. But encouraging some of those private-ish accommodations and making sure that travelers know that your dorms are not full occupancy dorms. And if that means something too, like removing a bed, I know the hostel model is all about like huge, like pack people into a room and make as much money off of your square footage as you can. And that's just not something that during this season specifically is going to make you as much money. So if you need to take a bed out of a room and rephotograph all of your rooms, that may be a good way to drive that increase. We have seen a slower uptick for our dorm beds than we have our private rooms. We've definitely seen like way more demand for private rooms. Frankie, is that the same for you guys?
Yeah, God, it's so weird. We have like construction started in Bend, so we have a bunch of temporary construction workers coming in that need lodging, and so my dorm rooms are like full, and it's there's demand for everything here. I think Darren's question kind of ties into as well into vulnerable markets, right? You have a more vulnerable and less vulnerable markets. I can talk a little bit about that. I had some small notes here. Some of those look like, a vulnerable market is the big cities, right? So that's full service, 24-hour staffs. That's hostels that have dependent on big group bookings. Also gateway hostels that are fly-in markets, right? So these are really, really hard international ones. International markets, where the less vulnerable markets are places like Bunk and Brew, where we're a destination, right? People are coming to us. So what that looks like is a drive-to locations, that locations that are not dependent on air travel, suburban places, small towns, extended stays. It was all part of my notes. Strong brands, right? That really helps. So, it's kind of knowing this more vulnerable market and less vulnerable market that you're in, and just to kind of shape your business around that. We've also seen in Bend, the city forced all the Airbnbs and short-term lodging to stop. Now, Oregon, as a state in whole, allowed lodging, and the governor deemed it necessary business. So Oregon always allowed lodging to stay open, but then small cities and some counties banned certain aspects of lodging. So they got rid of the vacation rentals. Now, we weren't in that category. There's Deschutes County and there's the city of Bend. So Deschutes County kind of banned all the short-term Airbnbs. So that played in our favor, right? But yeah, so understanding those vulnerable markets that you're in, I think is going to be really, really important. Do a little research on that. I'd encourage everybody to, if they're in one of those more vulnerable markets.
So Stephanie asked, how do you keep the social distancing rule? Ask us to be responsible. So that's so tough with a hostel. It's super weird to go from a model where you're like, hey, make friends, talk to each other, hang out, and then immediately go to a model that's like, don't talk to each other, don't interact, stay away from each other. So that's really tough. What we've done to encourage that, and we're not sure how we're going to implement this yet. We're really playing through some different scenarios. We have closed our community spaces temporarily. So that's a big way we limited social distancing, is like really right now we have a very basic cooking area, and we don't have a lounge. We don't have our community room open, which has kept people separate. And then we also just have signage around, and we're very upfront, like this is a legal requirement by the city, and if you're not allowing it, especially with our staff, because our staff is our first priority for protection, if they're not keeping 6 feet from staff, they have to go. Like, that's just not acceptable. So you just have to ask them for that responsibility. If you see guests not wearing masks and it's required in your state or your city, just encouraging that, some sort of face covering or something like that, and saying, hey, when you're in the public space, like, you need to be aware that this is going to be enforced. Just respectfully doing that. I don't know, Frankie, you have more community space than we do open right now.
Yeah, that's like our core vibe, because we're a small hostel, right? So we are community. It's a really good question, actually. I was just responding to some European hostels about this in the European hostel chat. So we are keeping ours open. There was talk about maybe do a kitchen sign-up list. That's so hard. Everybody wakes up at different hours. You got 45 people you're trying to coordinate with 2 kitchens that we have between 2 houses. It's really difficult. We actually implemented an approach where we tried to put up signs to respect social distancing space, as you mentioned, the staff, make them feel safe and comfortable as well. They need to be there yours. But the other one is we adopted a gym concept. You go to the gym, you go and work out, like using a bench, you get sweaty, right? It's your obligation to spray down that bench with a little bleach water and then wipe it. We actually implemented that from phase 1 And we have this beautiful, gorgeous bathhouse. We actually closed all of our showers internally down. The bathhouse is it's tiled. It's easier to clean, easy to disinfect. We put up signs that, hey, when you get done showering, spray it down. Just like in common spaces, spray it down. You know, if you get done using it, so clean up after yourself. So we people have been really, really receptive to that. We still have our staff make 2-hour rounds for the hostel and then hour rounds for COVID-19 specific areas. So staff is still doing it, but they can't do it all. It's crazy to think they could do it all. You know, it's a virus. It's everywhere. But adopt a gym concept, I think, is important. I think it's been really successful. You know, the great thing about our clientele is they have low expectations in the sense of just as long as you meet health and safety standards, they're willing to be malleable. They're willing to do the little extra to help. So I think that's what we've done, and it's worked really well. And we keep our spaces open. We've all, you know, yeah.
That's a good idea. I think you could also create some clever signage around that. It's like, hey, gym rules, wipe everything down after you touch it.
Yeah,
it could be chill and not super scary for people. So I think that's a really good idea. That might be something we adopt too. We also, one thing we're talking about when we reopen our kitchen, it kills me because I care about the environment, but I also don't want anyone to get sick because a spoon wasn't washed properly. We ordered single like paper cups and plates and bowls and things so that people can use it, and it's more controlled what sort of dishware people are using. So I hope that helps too. Have you done anything like that, Frankie?
Yeah, I like that idea, getting into that the single-use items. We haven't done it. It's a good idea, but we haven't done it. I guess that might, you know, depending on cost, there's a cost factor there, right? But
of course, yeah, it kills me because I
Yeah.
hate doing that.
But I do like it. I like it. I hope we don't need to get there.
Who knows? We have a lot of people to control. We cut our towels into single-use towels is a comment.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I like that. We have a bunch of rags and towels and stuff we could probably do that with. I like that.
Yeah.
You could downsize some like some old ratty towels that are, you know, big ones, and just cut them downsize into like single-use rags, and then toss them into, you know, the bleach wash. Cool.
Yeah, it's a good way to reuse too. Any other questions before we wrap it up? I want to make sure we're being respectful of everyone's time and that this is a helpful seminar for you. I know you just want to stare at our faces all day, but we also have jobs.
Yeah, and feedback's always welcome on these seminars as well. Thanks, Darren. And you know, we could send out even an email and text about kind of more topics that you guys would like to see covered. Follow up with us about if you need any policy changes. Reach out to us one-on-one. We're happy to have those conversations.
So after this, we're going to send out the link to this. So if you found it helpful and would like to share it with any other hostel owners, feel free to do so. And we're talking about having something in June. So possibly something related to work trades or something like that. We've considered that as a topic, interests many people. So if you have any topic ideas, you can respond to that email with your suggestions. But thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you hopefully in June. And if you have any questions again or thoughts, just reach out to us. We're here to help. And we hope you stay safe and stay well.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Bye.